Okay, I'm Todd Walker with Archimania in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm the founding partner of the firm. The firm started in 1995.
And Barry Yoakum, partner with Archimania, Memphis, Tennessee. We're 15 people. We're 15 years old this year. Our practice is very varied. We deal with a wide range of type projects. Residential, commercial, scale is a very big thing to us, and we like to experiment with materials and a variety of design issues. We don't have a style. We explore.
Yeah, I think just to elaborate on what Barry said, with 15 people, the inception of the firm, the idea was that we would be a very collaborative firm, both kind of internally and externally. And I think much like the work being diverse, it allows us to develop different kinds of attitudes about commercial projects that we can learn from residential or small scale and vice versa. And I think that's what drives everyone in the office, I think, as a team. We think of no project too small and no project too large. And I think although we do work in other places, most of our work has been in our home state of Tennessee. And I think that all of our work tries to draw some roots from that environment that we work in. A lot of those are material roots. So we concentrate, there's a lot of concentration on materials and, as Barry said, scale. So that's... Okay, I think what architecture is, at least where we are in Memphis, has become an approach of teaching our community about what the built product is, about thinking of architecture in a new way, in a progressive way, how it impacts our social environment. It's something that we're not in what's been said by some as a center of fashion. We're not in an area where there's a lot of emphasis put on design and architecture. Maybe there is some emphasis on art, because I think as a whole there's a larger understanding about art, but not as much understanding about architecture. And there are not a lot of architects in our community that push the community to be more progressive in the built environment. And of course we're the only ones that can do that, I think. So from our standpoint, Barry and I, through the firm, have even been looking at development opportunities and how architects could lead that. So we're kind of in some beginning stages of moving forward in some regard to that. So what architecture is, to me, I think has something to do with a more local sense, at least what's come out of it for me, is it's more localized and not as much thinking about what it is at the country at large or the nation at large, because of the importance, I think, that what's come out of architecture in our community through our office. So I think it's as much about experiencing and learning as it is anything.
I guess to add where Todd's talking about the experience, architecture to me it's been a lifestyle. It's I think interviewing you a few minutes ago about all the way from Chile and how you're trying to make it a communication device. I think the work we've been trying to do over the years and continue, maybe even more, we've amped it up as far as creating dialogue, a reason to dialogue. And that's for those people that may not understand architecture, kind of like what the Daniel Pink thing today was, as far as the whole empathy of understanding where we come from and the environment we're in. There's a lot of lip service to environment, and we see it on TV every day. And I think I think our architecture, the reason we're interested in what we're doing in a area that's people may not connect with as progressive as it is, but we seem to be finding out now, not only on a national basis, but perhaps even an international. Your own interest is it's about creating that dialogue. You wanted to have discussion about it, and the work itself can speak for itself at times. And it's simple, it's clean, but it's got a lot of variety to it. And I think being able to do that and create the reason to communicate about it and talk about other cultural issues, that's architecture. It's living it. It's a career. For too many years, architects, we've taken back seats, and there's so many other parts of developing, and I think the words developers and stuff like that are not the right communications tool to successfully build communities. And as we're starting to see, design is such a big deal on a large international level, that we really need to be taking a stronger role in developing these standards and developing approaches, and maybe even on a political basis. I don't think we do enough, and I think architects, the way we think, the way we solve problems, is exactly what this world needs. And it doesn't matter if it's on a little microcosm of a place like Memphis or a larger metropolitan area or on a country level. I think we've got to start becoming leaders much more so than we have. We need to be not reactionary, but we need to be more action focused.
I just want to follow up on something Barry said. I think leadership is key for architects, and we've lost that over time as a consensus. And I think the other kind of sad part of that is thinking about what we're providing as a general rule, architects around the country. And I think a lot of people, a lot of architects that are doing good work, generally kind of laugh at the fact that maybe 5% of the work that's being done is good work. And I think that's where we need to push our colleagues, we need to push our competition. We all need to learn. We use the word collaborate for our office. We need to learn how to collaborate with other architects and work in a way so that we can make it a better environment. And I think that that's something beyond the development side, which is good. And we talk about developers a lot, and developers aren't trained generally to do what they do. And I think that on the other side of that, a lot of architects, there are so many architects that think they should be designers, and I think that we all have specialties. We all have things that we're better at, and I think that when architects learn that there's many ways to get good design, and we try to focus on what that is and what that means as a general rule, I think it can be better for everyone. So I guess in a way, I think we need to learn how to work together more rather than apart. I think at the beginning of our firm, there was always this idea of it being a progressive firm, and I think the only real way to be progressive was two words for us. One was to be creative, and the other was to be innovative. And we can term innovation in a lot of ways, but I think innovation to me is kind of going beyond the norm. However far we go beyond the norm, and allowing the general public to react in some way that allows them to have an understanding, whether they like what's being done, and try to term it as modern or however they want to term it. They always seem to want to stylize it. But I think that the importance of innovation is being progressive to me, and having that ambition to always better ourselves in whatever we do. If it were designing cars. We would always want to do better and to innovate. And I think it's the same for architecture, and it just pushes everything for a constant evolution. You know, that if we all kind of get stuck on the same path and stay there, there's no way to evolve architecturally. So I think it really is about just evolving to better architecture, to better ourselves. Barry, you want to add?
Yeah, just brief. I mean, I think to me, Todd said it best where we're at right now in innovation, but for the kind of practice we have, I think it's just the simplicity of taking a problem and a little different twist. Innovation doesn't have to mean to progress something. Sometimes it's dumbing things down. Sometimes it's just seeing basic essence, especially when you have challenging budgets, and time is a part of that. So really, it's taking every opportunity we've got, no matter how simple the project is, and getting something that's a little bit of essence that's different, that's unique enough that where you've explored something. I think it's everything for the way we do it. I mean, Todd talked about collaboration. That's not just internal. That's not just from a studio aspect. The way we have to get work or we engage, it's a very, we use a process, we talk about visioning, and it's a way we get into our clients' minds. That's a form of networking. The way we do it in the community, and it's not one partner or one person in the firm. It's really everybody in the firm, for the most part, has some connection to the community at large, and that helps people know who we are or something about us, and it's an extension. And networking is everything. I mean, the funniest thing about a practice is those people that want to become more recluse designers or recluse practitioners, they're missing out as part of that communication dialogue.
Yeah. Barry likes networking, and I don't like networking, but it doesn't mean that I don't do it. And I say that because everything we do, I guess how I would term networking, and Barry would probably term it differently because he deals with it on a different level than I do. But I think, and for the architects that might argue they don't need networking, I think everything is networking. You know, what we're doing today is networking. But it to me, the perspective, we're not here because we're networking. We're here because we love architecture and we're passionate about it, and I think that's going back to our local community and the broader community, because essentially everything ripples out. We network through our name. You get name recognition. You get project recognition. You do all these things, and sometimes I think networking could be just like being in a book. A project seen in a book, and that's an idea about networking. So we don't have to deal with networking just as a marketing thought. I mean, I think it is just as much a design thought as it is a marketing thought, and it definitely has something to do with the culture of the environment, because some work that we do is kind of arrived at by networking. Some has nothing to do with networking. Now, when you say nothing to do with networking, I say everything has to do with networking on some level. But I think in the way we generally think about networking, it comes about in different ways. So that's an interesting question, and that's one that could be a really long answer. But I think there are more and more design architects that are doing more networking. However, they may not realize it's networking, or they may not term it as networking. It's just because we're passionate about what we do, so we like to talk about it, or we like to deal with it in any way we can.
people that are wanting to become students of architecture and they're looking for colleges of architecture or places to study, I think the thing I would recommend is that it's definitely you need to evaluate the staff that's there, the professors are there, and the type of adjunct professors that are attending there, and what kind of extracurricular kind of activities that promote architecture around that school. And I'm on our board and have been for about 15 years, and I think the thing I've noticed is those things change somewhat over time, but once people are part of an institution, it really kind of sets the tone, and it ought to match up with being progressive, that it should not be always looking backwards. It ought to be pushing a student. It ought to be an environment that really encourages students to explore not what's been done, but what could be done. So I think, and not all schools are like that. I think you really got to look at the professor, the leadership.
Yeah. That's a question that is really close to me, because I knew I wanted to be an architect since I was 5 or 6, but when I started looking at colleges, I didn't really know anything about architecture. Really, I knew I wanted to do that, whatever it was. And for me, it became important to look at a lot of schools and to kind of develop my own criteria and try to begin to understand what my passion could be. And I think it let me focus on having a better understanding of my ultimate choice, because I looked at a lot of options. And I think the other part of that is just communicate with as many people as you can that not only are in a college that you may be looking at, but in the profession. I think you can learn so much, because at the age of 18 or 17, you don't really know what to look for, and probably you have parents or family that may not be in that profession, which was in my case. So they wanted to help me. They wanted to take me to colleges and do anything they could, but they couldn't help me on a level of really understanding what studying architecture was about. So I think talk to as many people in the profession as you talk to people in those colleges, because you'll get different perspectives and you'll have a different level of understanding, and at some point you can kind of begin to focus on what helps you make a decision. I think different people would be into different kinds of schools for different reasons. So, but you have to figure out what those reasons are for you. And fortunately for me, I did that. But it was because I looked at many places. So I'd say just talk to as many people as you can, in academia and in practice.
It's kind of funny. Todd and I have talked about, we're probably getting to a point where we could probably write a book on it. And number one, it would not be like any other book, because I think the kind of practice we have, there's not a business model for it. It's this whole idea of, number one, somebody considering starting a practice or how to manage a practice or lead a practice is probably more important. That is, one reason it's Archimania. It's kind of hard to be in a meeting with us and know who a partner is. It's really about whoever's really needs to be leading that project, whether they're intern related or they're very skilled licensed architects, or it's one of us. We work on just about everything at some level, along with other people in the firm. I mean, it's so one of the things people should look at is go get training in it, because it's not taught in schools. And the other thing I have found over the years, because I've done seminars on this, is usually the people that are in practice ahead of you, the principals we would have watched, they didn't know what they were doing. I can't think of a practice I was around where they faked it, they figured it out. So go try to get outside architecture and see what other firms like an IDEO that deals in on an international basis how to get the best out of design. those are role models, and if you find out from them, what they do is they go outside architecture and they get other disciplines to help create that. And we're seeing that more often. I think people are starting to open up to it. So I think leading and managing a future firm is being open and looking outside architecture as models of how to run things. And the other is to keep an extremely flat organization. Because once you start thinking we know something that younger or less experienced maybe in a certain area doesn't know, then we're hurting ourselves. So always be open-minded to other ideas and keep a very flat organization.
Yeah, I think opening a practice is, at whatever age you are, is much like having a child for the first time. And my dad would argue that it's better to have children when you're young and dumb. And I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I was 32 in starting Archimania. And so there's nothing like 15 years of hard knocks and learning from that. Experience learning, I think, is great. So I would tell anyone that is, I think, interested, a young architect interested in opening a firm or moving in that direction, you do it with methodical thought and do it with apprehension, but do it with passion. And know that if you're passionate about it, whatever it is, you can make it work. It's not easy. I mean, I think it's like starting architecture school. I mean, I think, we have these different levels in life. You start architecture school after having graduated from high school, and you're on to a new journey, and you graduate from architecture school and you're on to a new journey. You feel like you have all these experiences, but each time you're starting as a child again. And I think it's even in starting this practice after working at firms for 5 or 6 years prior, or maybe 8 years prior to that, you begin to develop an understanding of what architecture is, so you feel confident enough to start a firm then. But then you have to realize that it's baby steps again, because you don't know how to run a practice, even if you've been taught it. If you've taken courses, I think there's something about really learning from experience in doing it, just like architecture. So I think that, of course, we would always argue that everyone should own their own practice at least once, because they would be more appreciative to people that do. But it's not easy, and it's not going to be easy. But if you're passionate about it, it's going to be fun, and you'll continue learning. And if you stop learning, then you've probably stopped developing. Would be my guess. To me, the internet, and I'll start with the website, because it really becomes your portfolio of work, and it can be used in so many different ways. People can look and understand the culture of your firm, even from Chile. People can understand your projects to some level without having to come to an office or come to the project. The internet makes this kind of flat line that we work on in collaboration really easy. If we want to work with someone in another state or another country, if we want to research, if we want to use ArchDaily for research, it's great, it's there. And people use it in our office all the time, among many other things. So I think it makes life easier, especially as compared to architects years ago that had no options like that other than travel or learning things that they've seen in books. So I think it although it adds complexity to what we do on one level, on the other hand, it really simplifies and makes easy just information sharing and gathering.
Okay, I think I'll just jump onto the internet in general. I just think it's connectivity. I think it's definitely made the world smaller, and it absorbs our attention perhaps at times too much, but it makes it where we can actually communicate with one another. And I think the things that you're starting to see where you can connect at a different level. It's not about just portfolios. It's not just about our work. I think it's more about exploration. It's a great tool. It's hard to ignore it anymore.
Yep.
It's just part of every day.
I want to say one more thing. I think the other thing is worth saying is the downside of it. And I think the downside has more to do with, we're talking about young people, whether they're students or young architects now, and it's easier to stay in an office, or it's easier to not get out and experience things because it's so easy to sit at the desk and do it. And I think knowing that everything we've talked about today, from networking to just experiencing architecture, it's something that has to be experienced, and it can't be experienced through the internet in the way that it was intended to be experienced. We can learn from it and we can use it, but that's the only kind of downside I see, and that can be true for all of us, but especially say younger people that need to really get out because they've maybe not had the opportunities because they've always had the choice of the internet, whereas in our younger years that wasn't a choice, and you had to go out and you had to experience it and you had to see it firsthand. So I just say that's the part that for the younger generation, let's be wary of and make sure you're doing both equally, like using the left side and the right side of your brain.